Hey everybody, how you doing tonight? Welcome. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe notifications. Have a great show tonight. Got a few things to talk about. As usual, we are talking about important ideology and history. We're answering super chat questions. We're checking in with people around the country. We got a guest tonight who's going to join us. It's going to be awesome. So welcome everybody. So glad to have you all here with us. Welcome. We are going to get rolling.
The century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Why is it not? Oh, there we go. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. So glad to be here with all of you. Some interesting news today. Tech censorship is on the march. For those of you who haven't heard, Pepe Escobar, a very important anti-imperialist journalist, has been banned from Twitter. In addition to that, Jackson Hinkle has been banned from Twitch, and Haas has also been banned from Twitch. So the tech giants are completely out of control. Now, we saw that they have gone after Scott Ritter, the former UN weapons inspector and whistleblower, and they've gone after him and shut his voice down as he's been challenging U.S. allegations about Russia, speaking up about the biolabs, etc. So that's, pretty unbelievable. And they are out of control. And, we're going to talk a lot about that. We talk a lot about Silicon Valley fascism on these streams and the amount of power concentrated in the hands of the tech monopolists. Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, those folks have a huge amount of power. And they use their power, Mark Zuckerberg, they use their power to influence politics in the United States, to impact political discourse. We talk about that a lot on these streams, and we're going to continue talking about it. Solidarity to Jackson Hinkle, solidarity to Haas, solidarity to Scott Ritter, solidarity to Pepe Escobar. They've tagged me already with the Russian state-affiliated media tag as a scarlet letter, as something to try and get people to not listen to what I have to say. They tagged George Galloway, a former member of parliament, a lifelong socialist activist and political leader, one of my greatest heroes, George Galloway. They've tagged him, with Russian state-affiliated media. This is what's going on. Marxism says liberalism is no longer progressive. I'm writing your super chats down. All right, so there we go. Liberalism is no longer progressive. All right. Russia lost its biggest ship to a Ukrainian missile off the coast of Odessa. I don't know if that's true. Are they taking NATO seriously enough? Is that a question? I mean, I guess I'll write it down. So there you go. All right. All right. So, yeah, these are wild times, folks. We're going to fight against the tech censorship. But I wanted to take this moment to remind you all that we don't know how much longer I will be on this platform. I have never had a strike on YouTube. Never once have I had a strike on this channel, not a copyright strike, not an obscenity strike. On top of that, we're fully monetized. We haven't had an issue with demonetization. But we don't know how much longer that will last, especially since our subscriber count is rising. We are at this point approaching 23,000 subscribers. And that is amazing, by the way. For a channel this size, that is amazing. There's probably people watching right now who were here at the beginning. They can remember when there were 10 people watching these live streams. There were 5 people watching these live streams. We thought it was a good live stream if there was 60. We thought it was a good live stream if there was 70. And now there's live streams with 400 or 500 people watching. We're doing really good stuff here, folks. But because we're doing good stuff, we may be entering the area where we face such censorship. So there are 2 things you can do in order to make sure that you do not lose track of this amazing community if the Silicon Valley fascists move in on us. Thing number 1 that you can do is sign up on Rockfin. We're on Rockfin right now streaming, and sign up on Rockfin. And at that point, if you're on Rockfin, Rockfin's not going to take us down. They don't have a rule against this kind of thing. So you can check us out on Rockfin. We'll keep going on Rockfin, number 1. It's one thing you can do. Number 2, sign up on Patreon. Because if you're on Patreon, I have a way of reaching out to you and messaging you. You get a free copy of all the books we do, and we can keep track of you. So if for some reason you get, you come back and this channel is gone, or if we get demonetized, which it could happen, right? And then, we won't be able to, really have a cash incentive to stay on here. We're going to keep going. We're not going to go away. You can look for me on Rumble. You can look for me on Rockfin. You can look for me on Odyssey. All of our streams and videos get automatically posted on Odyssey. I ain't going away. So prepare for this. Prepare yourselves, and be ready to plug yourself back in with this community. So there you go. I just wanted to make that announcement. So Patreon, go sign up on Patreon. Go sign up on Rockfin. And hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and hit the notifications bell, and be ready for when they come for us, because I've been warning you all for over a year. They will probably come for us. And honestly, I'm surprised they haven't, right? We're on here questioning their war narrative about Russia. We're on here, we're on here refusing to march lockstep behind Joe Biden and his wrecking of the U.S. economy. We are anti-imperialists. And right now, I think they think that they can just inoculate audiences against us. They've got Sophie from Mars and Thought Slime and Vosh and others making hate videos against us. But it may be that they eventually do, move in to just straight up censor us. And so you need to be prepared. I love this community. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going away. We just may not be able to do it on this platform for much longer. Same for Facebook, right? So yes, there you go. Just wanted folks to be aware of that. Now, wanted to let you all know, got plenty of unnamed water beverage here. I guess I'll be taking drinks of it as we go along. It is springtime. My face is bright red, spring allergies. It's one of those days, one of those seasons. But just want to let you all know that the way we do things is that I give my opening remarks, and then we do the roll call. We find out who's on the other side of the camera, names and locations. We find out who is here, who's watching, and that's always fun because it's people from all over. I mean, those names and locations. Red is the left wing of Capitol. All right, these streams, these people. I mean, watching. It's all over the place. RedTube is the left wing of Capitol, we always do that. And then the second half of the show is just me answering your super chat questions. So if you have a super chat, I'm writing them down as we go. I'll just pause and write them down as we go along. That's how we tend to roll. And then that's how the second half of the show will go. So I'll just move into my opening remarks. At the end of my opening remarks, I've got a guest who's going to hop on, a good friend. I think a lot of you know him already, and he'll be joining us. Probably, I told him to hop on around 9:30, but we may keep going the opening remarks a little bit longer, but we shall see. We got a guest hopping on, someone that you all probably already know. So that's how we're going to do it. I just want to get into my opening remarks. So folks, I debate with myself about how much I should respond to people, right? It's actually something I wrangle with a lot. I get so many of these insane attacks, people who think I'm anti-Semitic, people who think I'm transphobic, people who think I'm a neo-Nazi white supremacist, people who, look at my life of anti-racism and how I videotaped an act of police brutality and got 2 two African American young women acquitted in a court, and how I risked my life on a ship to Yemen and trying to bring aid to the people of Yemen as the USA was backing Saudi Arabia and bombing them. And and people say I'm a white settler colonialist, I'm an American nationalist, blah 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 blah. I mean, there's just so much crap that comes at me. I mean, and it's really relentless, really relentless. And for the most part, a lot of it is just not even worth responding to, because none of these people ever go, "Oh, you're anti-racist. Oh, no one ever admits they're wrong on social media. God, you can't admit you might be wrong about something, God forbid, and so that's generally, it's not worth responding to. But every so often, there's something that someone criticizes me for, that in their criticism, they actually open up a question that is worth discussing. It's very rare, especially with the individual who we'll be talking about tonight. Occasionally, though, it does happen that someone will, say something critical of this channel, or something accusatory or negative about this channel. And in doing so, they will point to a question, a political question that is actually worth engaging with. And this is one of those rare instances. So I am actually going to respond to it. I'm going to respond to it. Not sure if it's necessarily the best decision to make, but I'm responding to it because I want to talk about the question this person raised. That's why I'm responding to it. Because this is just classic. This is just classic. There you go. So this is a video that was posted online criticizing me recently. The title of it was, I believe it was Caleb Maupin's hatred for the lower classes. That was what they talk about on here. And this is the clip. This is them. Some of what they said in response to me, and I believe this comes from Jew and somebody who he's got on there, and this is their interpretation of my words. And it's important to talk about what these words actually mean, because this is really relevant to everything we talk about with the synthetic left, with Marx, with economics, etc. So this is actually a little bit of the latest attack on me from Jason Unruhe. Oh boy. All right. Why is it not playing? It's one of those nights, folks. One of those nights.
He knows the lumpen are unemployed people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's different kinds of lumpen, but he knows that. You just called everybody who is unemployed because of capitalist crisis lumpen and inherently criminal. Like, I'm sorry, Caleb, but there is actually a difference. But wow, okay, yeah, okay.
He's actually specifically gaslighting here as well, because the Panthers didn't say most people are lumping. They said most black proletarians are, by technicality, Lumpenproletariat. They're disenfranchised. He's actually actively gaslighting black people now.
And then around in his stupid meetings going, oh, hey, look, we have stuff by Fred Hampton. Like, you know what? The best meme I've ever seen regarding the Will Smith slapping Chris Rock thing was somebody reposted that, but put Caleb Maupin's head on it, and then put his own head on Will Smith and said,
all right. You saw there that I am saying that the Lumpenproletariat are criminal elements. And Jason says the Lumpenproletariat is everyone who's unemployed. And he says that I called all unemployed people criminal. Now, I know there's a lot of people watching this that aren't going to believe anything that I say, right? Because whatever I say, I'm an evil, lying, Nazbol, white supremacist. Nothing I say could ever possibly be true, because I am an evil person who once appeared on RT or something like that. So for those of you who may not believe me, this is Audiopedia, and this is
Lumpenproletariat is a term that was originally coined by Karl Marx to describe the layer of the working class that is unlikely ever to achieve class consciousness and is therefore lost to socially useful production, of no use to the revolutionary struggle, and perhaps even an impediment to the realization of a classless society. The word is derived from the German Lumpenproletariat, Lumpen literally meaning miscreant as well as rag. The Marxist Internet
Lumpen literally meaning miscreant.
Archive writes that identifies the class of outcast, degenerated and submerged elements that make up a section of the population of industrial centers, which include beggars, prostitutes, gangsters, racketeers, swindlers, petty criminals, tramps, chronic unemployed or unemployables, persons who have been cast out by industry, and all sorts of declassed, degraded or degenerated elements. In the 18th Brumaire of Louis Napoleon, 1852, Marx gives this description of the Lumpenproletariat, alongside decayed railways with dubious means and of dubious origin, alongside ruined and adventurous offshoots of the bourgeoisie, were vagabonds, discharged soldiers, discharged jailbirds, escaped galley slaves, swindlers,
frustrating. My internet has gone out. So we'll start that video up again. There we go. This is the Audiopedia definition of Lumpenproletariat.
Lumpenproletariat is a term that was originally coined by Karl Marx to working class that is unlikely ever to achieve class consciousness and is therefore lost to socially useful production, of no use to the revolutionary struggle, and perhaps even an impediment to the realization of a classless society. The word is derived from the German word Lumpenproletariat, Lumpen literally meaning miscreant, as well as rag. The Marxist Internet Archive identifies the class of outcast, degenerate.
All right. Wow. I don't know why this keeps happening, but the internet keeps going off. So we'll just try this one more time. This is so awkward and frustrating. And I think we'll skip ahead because you've seen a lot.
Of industrial centers, which include beggars, prostitutes, gangsters, racketeers, swindlers, petty criminals, tramps, chronic unemployed or unemployables, persons who have been cast out by industry, and all sorts of declassed, degraded or degenerated elements. In the 18th Brumaire of Louis Napoleon, 1852, Marx gives this description of the Lumpenproletariat, alongside decayed railways with dubious means of subsistence and of dubious origin, alongside ruined and adventurous offshoots of the bourgeoisie, were vagabonds, discharged soldiers, discharged jailbirds, escaped galley slaves, swindlers, mountebanks, lazzaroni, pickpockets, tricksters, gamblers, maquero, brothel keepers, porters, literati, organ grinders, ragpickers, knife grinders, tinkers, beggars, in short, the whole indefinite, disintegrated mass, thrown hither and thither, which the French call la bohème. In the 18th Brumaire, Marx rhetorically describes the Lumpenproletariat as a class fraction that constituted the political power base for Louis Bonaparte of France in 1848. In this sense, Marx argued that Bonaparte was able to place himself above the two main classes, the proletariat and bourgeoisie, by resorting to the Lumpenproletariat as an apparently independent base of power, while in fact advancing the interests of the finance aristocracy. For rhetorical purposes, Marx identifies Louis Napoleon himself as being like a member of the Lumpenproletariat insofar as, being a member of the finance aristocracy, he has no direct interest in productive enterprises. This is a rhetorical flourish, however, which equates the Lumpenproletariat, the rentier class, and the apex of class society as equivalent members of the class of those with no role in useful production.
So that is the actual the very definition of the term Lumpenproletariat. Literally means miscreant. All unemployed people. The unemployed are a part of the proletariat. They're called reserve army of labor. That is the term for those who are unemployed. They are the reserve army of labor. The proletariat, number of people who are unemployed. The unemployed, however, the Lumpenproletariat refers to a layer unemployed. They are almost permanently unemployed, and they exist on the margins of society. Means it refers to a subclass of almost permanently and unemployed and desperately poor people who live in society. And because they are desperately poor, they tend to be involved in criminal activities, and they tend to be easily used as strike breakers, tools of the ruling class in beating back the proletariat. And they are a barrier to a working class revolution. This is what the term Lumpenproletariat actually means. Hey there, I'm back. I don't know what is going on tonight with this internet. It just keeps going off and it keeps going off and it keeps going off. And it keeps going off. And it's frustrating. It is certainly frustrating. Thing. Yeah, it is certainly frustrating to have our internet keep going off. But as I was saying, the very definition of the term Lumpenproletariat, the very definition of it, is miscreants, is activities. So for him to say that I somehow this is very bad. All right. Writing it down. And that essentially points to the confusion. Now, why is it that there is so much actually means? Why is there so much confusion around what this word means? Because of the New Left, because of the 1960s New Left. And the 1960s New Left was heavily influenced by writers like Frantz Fanon, who himself was heavily influenced by George Sorel. And there became a feeling among many within the 1960s left that the Lumpenproletariat was revolutionary. And there was an expansion of what it meant. Huey Newton of the Black Panthers, he kind of redefined Lumpenproletariat to the point that Lumpenproletariat referred to anyone who suffered discrimination, anyone who was poor. They redefined the Lumpenproletariat to mean lower level or more impoverished proletarians. That was kind of their redefinition of the term. And Frantz Fanon and others, they reinterpreted the Lumpenproletariat and the concept of it to mean something that it doesn't mean, to serve their political ends. That's the source of the confusion. If you read literature from the 1960s, if you read literature from the 1970s, after the left had been completely manipulated and confused by the Congress for Cultural Freedom program and CIA manipulation, at that point, the definition of what it meant to be lumpen, that definition completely got shifted. And because of that shift in the definition, there seem to be a lot of people that think lumpen means black, that think lumpen means anyone who makes low wages. No, people who make low wages, people who are of a different race, people who are unemployed, they are part of the proletariat. What defines the lumpen proletariat, when it really gets down to it, and this is what Karl Marx, the point that he makes in the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, the point that he makes is that that essentially the lumpen proletariat are a class that does not produce value. They live on the margins of society, and they don't produce actual value. They are simply kind of grifting off of the existing society. They're kind of leeching off of the existing society. The proletariat is involved in production. They do the work of the country. They produce wealth. The lumpen proletariat are there robbing people. They're there grifting off of people. They're there running mini criminal enterprises, and they are not producing value. And that is the difference, right? The proletariat is the class that produces the wealth. The lumpen proletariat is a subclass within the proletariat that exists kind of leeching off the value that the rest of the proletariat produces. And Marx, in his agitation, he tried to link the lumpen proletariat to the finance capitalists by arguing that some of the ultra rich are like the lumpen proletariat because they also just kind of leech off society. They don't run industrial enterprises that produce value. They rather just kind of leech off the rest of society. And that's the term that Marx was referring to. And so that's what the word actually means. But there's a lot of confusion around it. And this romanticization of the lumpen proletariat is a very middle class trend. This idea that people that are drug dealers, people that are involved in gangs, people that are criminalized in this society, somehow romantic heroes, somehow they're the ones that are going to make the revolution, somehow they're the ones who are going to change society. That is a middle class deviation. And if you read what Marx wrote about in the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, what Marx wrote about was that in order to beat back the proletariat, in order to stabilize capitalism with Bonapartist maneuvering, Louis Bonaparte created a lumpen army, this mass of lumpen proletariats that he kind of threw at French society in the hopes of beating back any proletarian revolution. And that often this is what fascists will do. The fascist element, will create an army of lumpen proletarians that will go out and beat down the working class. Like we often talk about proletarians, lumpen proletarians being strike breakers. Many people talk about how back during the 1960s, the lumpen proletarians would go and beat up anti-war protesters. The Hells Angels Motorcycle Club was a very lumpen group. This was a group of people who sold heroin and sold drugs. They went around robbing people and beating people up. And when there were anti-war protests that went on, the bourgeoisie of the 1960s, the capitalist class and the U.S. government and the military and the police would mobilize the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club to go out and beat up anti-war protesters. And they were just this kind of lumpen marginal element that was utilized to do violent activities. And it's because, at one point in this video, they try to say that Mao's army in China was made up of proletarians. No, Mao's army in China was made up of peasants. It was made up of members of the peasant class, right? There was very little industrial production in China before the 1949 revolution. And in peasant society, yes, you'll have some peasants who are thrown off the land and become bandits. Yes, you'll have some peasants, there are different types of peasants. There are peasants in different situations. None of them are lumpen proletarians, because the lumpen proletariat is a section of the proletariat. It is a declassed and criminalized section of the proletariat. And that separates them. They're not peasants. They're not peasant bandits, and they're definitely not. They're not anything to do with the peasantry, right? They are not people who are just unemployed. They are a permanently criminalized layer of U.S. society. They are the lumpen proletariat. And the fact that he thinks somehow calling the lumpen proletariat criminal, when that is the very definition of the term, shows you how completely ignorant. One of the worst things there is who does not know what he is revising. And that's what we're seeing here with a lot of these young people. They are revisionists who do not know what you are revising. You're allowed to be a revisionist. No one's requiring you to believe everything that Marx said, but you must know what he said in order to revise it. And in the 60s, the New Left, the 1960s New Left, revised the understanding of the question of the lumpen proletariat. They changed it. They argued that the lumpen proletariat was more broad than it actually was. They argued that the lumpen proletariat would be the base solution because white workers were all bought off, blah, blah, blah. They came up with this big revision of the Marxist concept of the lumpen proletariat. And that's a revision. Jason has never learned the original Marxist concept of the proletariat. The word itself literally means miscreant. All he's ever learned is this hippy-dippy Maoist New Left stuff that is really just an attack on the broader proletariat of the Western countries. It's saying that average Americans have no revolutionary potential. And so he doesn't know the original, and he only knows the revision. And this is very, very dangerous. When people don't know the original concept, know the revision, they can't possibly effectively understand it. The revision is based on someone thoroughly understanding the original concept, understanding that original concept, and then arguing that it's not and tampering with it. But the fact that Jason is on here saying that that there's some ideological crime has been committed, I'm pointing out the actual meaning of the term. It shows he doesn't know what he's talking about. And this is a lot of what I see on the internet. People do not understand basic Marxist concept. They understand a 1960s New Left perversion of these concepts. And based on that, they come to conclusions that are just completely wrong. And this is a problem. This is a big problem. Now, I don't know why my internet is going so bad tonight. This is not a typical problem that we have. I have never seen anything like this. This is really bad. It's like every 2 seconds we go off, we're fuzzy, we can't get a good signal going. I have no idea what's going on. Thoughts on Great Leap Forward. All right, writing it down. Thoughts on the Great Leap Forward. We're just going to keep going. We're just going to persevere. This is all very, very frustrating and annoying. But we're just going to do the best we can. And in fact, I guess since we're off to such a rocky start, I think I'm going to let our guest know to come on in, and we'll see how it goes. Maybe the stream will get better. Maybe the streaming quality will increase. So I'm inviting our guest to come on. So there we go. But yeah. But yeah, folks, I don't know why this is happening. It's very, very frustrating to have your internet acting this way when you're trying to stream live. I mean, generally this doesn't happen. You have to wonder if this is related to that censorship that's going on. I mean, maybe it's not, right? I mean, who knows? We are in New York City. There's a lot of people on the internet doing stuff, but this is particularly frustrating to have. I know it's fuzzy as people are watching, and this is not good. This is very frustrating. This is very, very frustrating. But yeah, the concept of the Lumpenproletariat, and the idea that you can just build lumpen hit squads, lumpen gangs that will be used to kind of get the rest of the proletariat in line. They're not going to build a broad working class movement. Instead, you're just going to build a kind of gang of very action oriented and violent lumpen elements to enforce the will, enforce ideology, and enforce socialism on the rest of society. That's really a George Sorel fascist kind of deviation, and that's really big with the New Left. Herbert Marcuse, the CIA-linked intellectual who was kind of big in the Frankfurt. He said that the proletariat wouldn't make the revolution; it'd be the intellectuals. This is a big concept among the New Left, right? That average Americans are just too bought off to be revolutionary. Working people in Western countries, not really proletarians, and so because of that, they have no revolutionary potential. They're the enemy, which also is what the big bourgeoisie thinks, as it tries to lower their wages and drive their living standards down, because they see the broad masses of people, white, black, Arab, Asian, Latino, they see them as the enemy. They're trying to drive their wages down. They see, kind of building a gang of lump. All right. Wow. It just continues to go down. This is very, very frustrating. We just got to keep going. I don't know if I'll leave this stream up afterwards. We'll see how high quality it is. But there you go. Hey, Keaton, how you doing?
This is our guest. Good to be on.
The great Keaton Mansfield is with us tonight. How you doing? Good to see you.
I'm doing good. I hope the internet stays strong enough for us to.
Yeah, I have no idea what's going on. This is so frustrating, and it's been going on for a long time. At first, we were doing really well, and then it just kept cutting out. So hopefully we'll do well enough and not cut out again and leave this stream up. But maybe we'll delete it afterwards. I got plenty of videos to post.
Caleb, you know what they say. The NSA works hard, but CPI works harder.
Yeah, is that what they say? Is that what they're saying in the cornfields of Illinois? That's what everyone's. Yeah, many people are saying it in the cornfields of Illinois these days. But there you go. Well, happy Easter, by the way. Easter's coming up, right? We got, we got tomorrow is Maundy Thursday, and then we've got Good Friday, and then we've got Easter. And you are the guy that I generally turn to whenever I'm looking for anything on the topic of Christianity and Marxism and the overlap. It's funny, you know, when I was a kid, I used to think Maundy Thursday was Monday Thursday, right? You know, it's like I'm like Moundy, like, you know, what does Moundy mean again? Do you know what the meaning of that? I don't.
No, Caleb, we were literally talking about this at dinner an hour ago. No, what?
Oh
But the
well.
funny thing was, we were saying, no, what's Monday, Thursday? So it must be a really a thing across the entire Midwest. It's Monday, Thursday.
Monday, Thursday. Yeah, I thought it, you know, it's like old folks, they don't say Monday, they say Monday, and they say Thursday and Friday, right? And that's how the older folks talk. And so they'd be like Monday, Thursday, you know, so I just be like, oh, it's Monday, Thursday. All right. Well, there you go. But yeah, I wanted to talk to you about a few different things. First of which is, you know, I mean, what do you make of what's happening right now in Ukraine? I mean, do you want to give kind of an update on what you've observed? I know there's the Battle of Mariupol is
Yeah.
going on. You know, what do you make of this current situation?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think it's a holy war. And when all this stuff started, basically, kind of the way I was judging it was going to be, I am going to feel confident that I'm supporting the right side when I see who starts destroying churches. If the Russian army starts destroying Ukrainian Orthodox churches, it's gonna cause me to have some concern. But that wasn't what happened. It was the it was the Ukrainian army, and especially the Azov battalion, which is like this Nazi mixed with like white nationalist paganism, this very weird brand of or mix of different ideologies and religion, started attacking Russian Orthodox churches. That I know, even in Canada, there were some Russian Orthodox churches where people would take like buckets of red paint and throw the red paint on the door, or throw it in and throw it on the icons. And I mean, that's generally a pretty good gauge of who's in the right and who's in the wrong. It's like the Iraq War, you know, when the US is blowing up not just Christian churches in Iraq, but mosques and even synagogues. If you're willing to destroy buildings that hold religious value and are such sacred buildings, it means that you're probably the bad guy in the situation. So that's been what I've tried, the framework I've tried to use when looking at this on a personal level. And I mean, Russia's winning. Their objective
Yeah,
was to secure the
well, it's
independence
funny
of
because there's
Donbass,
a
and they're
lot
doing
of
that.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of like foundations and nonprofits that are dedicated to protecting Christians, you know, that are protecting Christians from persecution, etc. But a lot of them only seem to focus on communist countries. And there's, you know, more people go to church on Sunday morning in China than in any other country in the world at this point, far more than in the United States. You know, and at this point, you know, in Cuba, not just Catholics, but also Baptists and Santeria and all kinds of religious groups are operating freely. Meanwhile, in Saudi Arabia, there is an extreme amount of persecution of Christians. In Syria, the US-backed Syrian rebels were going into churches and beheading people and blowing up buildings and such, and you know, and all of that. And it seems like some of these nonprofits, they're more concerned about kind of feeding a US agenda that governments we don't like Iran or China or Cuba are anti-Christian, but they ignore that, like what you're describing. I mean, they're blatantly these Azov battalion fascists are blatantly attacking churches. You've got Canadians that are pumped up by the anti-Ukraine propaganda. They're attacking churches. You know, and it seems like, you know, these folks are not consistent if they want to protect Christians. Look, I went to church on Sunday morning in Tehran. I went to an Armenian Orthodox Christian church, and it was a beautiful ceremony. And actually, I found out when I went there in Iran that the Islamic law does not apply within the church grounds. So they can have communion wine, even though Islam doesn't allow wine. Women don't have to wear headscarves in the church grounds, etc. And that Iran does a lot to protect the rights of Christians. But any denomination that's supporting Israel isn't allowed because Zionism is illegal in Iran because it's considered a form of racism. It demonizes Palestinians. It justifies the crimes of Israel. So,
Yeah.
but you know, there are synagogues. I actually visited a synagogue in Iran as well. These groups that, you know, where are they? Where are these groups that are so concerned about the persecution of Christians? Where are they speaking up about what the Azov battalion is doing?
Caleb, twofold on that one. Back to what you're saying about China and the attendance of church. Now, China has a vastly smaller Christian population than the US does, but proportionally it's way more active. I remember when I was in high school, it was like sophomore year, and I was in a class on like Catholic Church history, and they were talking about China and I guess like the Patriotic Church of China, like the Chinese Christian, like basically their specific, the Chinese denomination of Christianity. And the teacher told this anecdote that was like, oh, well, there's this man living in China who went to mass every Sunday and was a faithful Catholic and was super dedicated to the faith. But the Chinese government was trying to repress him, so he fled to America, and he like started his own business, and he started making a bunch of money and started going to church less and less and less. And the moral of it was, when we're oppressed, it makes our faith stronger. But I remember raising my hand and being like, wait, doesn't this just mean that like China's like encouraging like Christians to be active Christians more than the US does, and that capitalism and the pursuit of money above all else is anti-Christian? The Bible says that, you can either worship God or you can worship money. And in the US, the official state religion of the United States is mammon. It's the worship of money.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because recently the Vatican recognized the Chinese Communist Party aligned wing of the Catholic Church in China. For a while, there were two wings of the Roman Catholic Church in China. You had the underground wing and the officially recognized by the communist wing. And it was a big deal. I think it was in 2017, maybe 2016, that the Pope actually recognized the Communist Party aligned wing of the church. That was a big deal. That was a very, very big deal. And that indicated there may soon be diplomatic relations between the Vatican and Beijing. And the other thing, though, is that, you'll hear stories about the persecution of Christians in China, but often it's not referring to just Christians. It's referring to like crazy cults, aligned by the U.S. government. For example, have you ever heard of Eastern Lightning?
Eastern Lightning?
Yeah, Eastern Lightning is a group of Chinese Christians, I guess, who they worship a woman who they say is the second coming. And she never speaks. Her husband speaks on her behalf, but she's the second coming. And she now lives in Brooklyn, New York, and she makes public statements, and they broadcast her over the internet. They're not her, but her husband making statements on her behalf. And they're illegal in China. And the reason that they're illegal was because there was an incident in China where I guess they were leafleting at a McDonald's to promote their religious cult that believes this woman is the second coming of Jesus, and her husband has to like speak for her. They were promoting their group at McDonald's, and there was a father and his daughter, and the father blocked the daughter. The daughter was going to get one of their leaflets, and the father blocked the leaflets. And so the two members of the cult murdered the father and killed him in McDonald's. And at that point, the Chinese government looked into it, and they said, yeah, this is probably not a very healthy group. And look, they're tied to American intelligence and the CIA, and we're going to outlaw this organization. So now they're in exile. They live in New York City. And, and you'll hear about them being persecuted, and they'll say, oh, Christians are being persecuted in China. Well, no, the Eastern Lightning cult, that is a particularly dangerous group that is tied to American intelligence, might be being persecuted in China. And you can argue about whether or not that's a bad thing, but portraying it like all Christians are being persecuted in China is just not an accurate representation.
Well, Caleb, I'll argue if it's a good or a bad thing. If we were living in Christendom, if Europe was still Christendom, these people would have been burned at the stake for heresy. This is, by the Christian standard, China, the Communist Party did probably the most light form of punishment they could have to this sect, because I think the other option in Christian law is burning at the stake, and I didn't see Xi lighting the torch to burn the heretics.
Well, false messiahs are generally not appreciated in any Christian country. But what's also kind of interesting, though, is that there's a monument to the Taiping uprising. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
30 or 40 years before Mao was born, there was this huge, uprising in China of peasants, and it was led by a guy who claimed to be Jesus's younger brother, and he was brought to China to create the heavenly kingdom, and he built like a peasant army that fought against the emperor, and there was like a big civil war led by this guy. And actually, when Mao took power, they built this monument, and it actually honors the Taiping uprising as one of the most important steps in the rebuilding of China as a modern country. So that's kind of amusing as well.
Yeah. No, the Taiping uprisings, and it's awesome. Obviously, maybe a little bit theologically misguided, but still having a good intention at heart, which I think counts for just as much, if not more, than just the core theology.
Absolutely. Well, do you have anything else you'd like to share with our audience tonight in the lead up to Easter and in the lead up to, you were at the CPI conference. Your talk is posted, by the way. Great presentation. And you introduced me, and my talk is also, it's in the process. I just finished editing it today, so it should be up later tonight, my speech from the CPI conference. But do you have anything to say to our audience about world events or anything else?
Maybe not specifically world events, but just more in general. I know a big thing that's talked about, Caleb, on your channel and Infrared and on Jackson is, the rise of Malthusianism and the Great Reset. And I got to say, it's enjoyable to see communists using this, talking about the Great Reset, very kind of populist terminology, even if obviously the Great Reset, the conference that was called that, the Great Reset Conference, isn't necessarily how some of the QAnon people describe it, but it's the sentiment of it, this sentiment that, you're going to have less and we're going to make you be happy, is a very real sentiment. And the fact that there's at least half of the country, if not more, want to fight against that and the whole New World Order and whatnot. Well, it may be a little bit misguided ideologically or with some of the policies or what it really looks like, or perhaps more importantly, who's behind it. It's not Trump, sadly, isn't leading the charge against the deep state, but his rhetoric of we got to fight the deep state, we've got to drain the swamp, we've got to get rid of this political corruption, that obviously was a winning campaign. I mean, that kind of tapping into that sense of Americans know that something's wrong in our government and obviously can't quite put a finger on exactly what it is or why it is. But using that, Trump was a demonstration that I think that communists can be successful, that we can use this language. Lenin, if he was alive in America right now, he would probably be in, talking to all these QAnon groups and trying to guide them and using this sort of rhetoric. I see no reason why we can't as well, and why we can't tap into the QAnon movement and bring these people to be more right. I found when you're talking to a conservative, usually first off, the best way to win them over and to get them to listen to you is to start talking about how bad liberals are. And I've also found that if you want to, don't say, no, you're wrong, no, this isn't right, no, it's capitalism, that's presented in a way, argue like this, take these values, this ideology, don't call it scary words, don't call it communism or Marxism at first, at least. Be like, this is why liberals aren't bad because they're just all pedophiles. And it's like, no, that's just an extension of them being these psychopathic people who care only about their own personal gain and not about their community and not about these core tenets of humanity. I think that there's a real possibility to win these people over.
Absolutely. Well, no, and we got to be able to talk to anybody in the country, and we got to be able to engage with anybody. And we don't have the luxury of declaring people unwelcome and just writing people off. That's what I get so frustrated with the performative politics on the internet, where it's like people think they gain points by denouncing somebody, right? Look at me, this person, I don't approve of them, they're bad. Well, good for you. But in the real world, you don't build movements by making enemies. You build movements by making friends and by finding common ground with people who don't agree with you. And this virtue signaling, it's like, I want to prove on the internet what a good person I am. Well, that's all well and good, but at the end of the day, what have you actually changed? Nothing, right? If it's just performance art. And there just seems to be this huge desire to just kind of perform. And, there's a lot of people in the QAnon world who realize that something is rotten in the state of Denmark. There's something evil at the core of our society that needs to be changed. So what's this? Speaking on Keaton's last point, last night, Haas had a talk with Nick Fuentes to build a popular movement against the establishment. I didn't know that. Oh, well, there you go. I wasn't aware. Where can we watch that, Captain Waffles? I'd like to watch that. I'd like to see how Haas responded to that fellow. I'm not sure if I would. Oh, go ahead, Keaton.
I was going to say, I made a short video against Nick Fuentes recently. And I decided to take it down because I honestly, the criticisms I made, I don't think they were in good faith. I don't think they were accurate. And so I was wrong in that criticism. Now I perhaps might revisit that with a better understanding. I will watch this video Haas put out, but from what I understand, there's a lot of problems in the America First movement that Nick Fuentes leads. But I mean, that isn't to say we can't work with them. Our good friend Lily, who's in CPI, her cousin is a member of America First and has met Nick Fuentes a number of times. So there obviously is maybe a little bit of common ground there, and hopefully Haas has found that.
What is it? I think Woody Guthrie, he had a song about the America First Committee during World War II, and it was led by Charles Lindbergh, right? And it's, they say America First, but they mean America Next, I think was his line.
Yeah.
Right? Because the America First Committee was this isolationist group that wanted to keep the USA out of World War II. I mean, that was originally what they were, the America First Committee. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild. I'm not opposed to debating anybody on the right. I've done it before. Sometimes, but that doesn't mean that I'll do it in every instance I get the opportunity to do it. I would debate. I did debate Augustus Sol Invictus. I was one of the Charlottesville guys. I did debate. I had a crazy screaming match on the internet with some Nazis. But like Richard Spencer, I look at his debates, I don't feel like it would be productive because he doesn't really care about capitalism or socialism. All he really cares about is white nationalism and white separatism. And like his debate with Jason was all about how, like, oh, if you're a true communist, you should support white separatism or something. That's just not a conversation I wanted to have. It's like, why would I want to engage that? You know what I'm saying? But
it's a stupid premise. The whole white nation thing is stupid in the first place.
Extremely stupid. And it's like, I just don't want to engage with stupidity, but there you go. Well, hey, if there's anything else, Keaton, you want to say, feel free, and hopefully we'll be having a conference in Chicago soon. Not yet confirmed, waiting to get all of our ducks in a row, as they say. But anything you want to add before you go?
I'll leave with Happy Easter to everyone watching and the blessings of God on every one of you, and especially you, Caleb. I look forward to the work to come.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Keaton. I'm glad you could check in with our audience. Good times. Wow. Well, thank you for staying with us tonight, despite all the technical difficulties. Thanks for staying with us. I really do appreciate folks staying with us. There we go. So yeah. Now I wanted to, I guess at this point, I guess we'll just do the roll call, names and locations. I will call you out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, we'll start answering the super chats because we got a lot of super chat questions to answer. So names and locations, I'll call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. All right. Naples, Florida. Harold Sullivan is with us. We got St. David's, Bermuda. We got Nick Hamilton in China. We got Kansas City, Missouri. Chaya in Montreal. Tristan in Maryland. Kieran from San Diego. Arturo from Alaska. Micah in Las Vegas. Buffalo, New York. Finn from Rhode Island. Christian from Bergen County. Grand Junction, Colorado. We got Scott and Angie in Miami. Daria Jones in Alameda County. Marissa in Washington State. Kendall in San Diego. Brainerd in Minnesota. DC, Olmsted, Ohio. Mike in North Carolina. Max the Sax is visiting Boston. Miami, Florida. John in West Denver. UP of Michigan. Marta in Poland. Jamie in St. Paul, Minnesota. Jose Gonzalez in Caracas, Venezuela. Dario from Brooklyn. Big Sur in California. Rex from San Diego. Sierra Vista, Arizona. Mo in Toronto. Treasure Coast, Florida. Detroit, Michigan. Zone 9B in California. Max in Vernon, Florida. Ottawa, Canada. Marlon, San Diego. Mo in Toronto. AB, Memphis. Max in Vernon, Florida. Ottawa, Canada. Good stuff, folks. North Carolina. Four Oaks, North Carolina. Memphis. Very, very good. Very, very good. Don D in NYC. Don D and NYC is with us tonight. That is great. That is great, folks. So glad to be here with all of you. And thank you for sticking around despite our awful technical difficulties. Yeah, not sure why the internet is being so uncooperative tonight. We got Mohsen from Iran. We got Marcos from Venezuela. We got Tucson, Arizona. Hugo from the Netherlands. Arturo from Alaska. Thank you for sticking around, folks. Thank you for sticking around. All right, we're going to start answering super chat questions. First question is, do you think that Steve Bannon is influenced by Lyndon LaRouche? I do not think that Steve Bannon is influenced by Lyndon LaRouche for multiple reasons. Number one, Lyndon LaRouche and his organization are very pro-China. Steve Bannon is obsessed with hating China. Number two, Steve Bannon's economic nationalism that he promotes is very, very different. It's very free market oriented. He just wants tariffs. Whereas the LaRouche people, they're all about government spending on infrastructure, state-run infrastructure projects, building a national bank. Their economic ideas are completely opposite. So for those two reasons, I would argue that no, I would think that Steve Bannon, the economic nationalist and the advisor to Trump, while he was kind of a populist, and he probably is more familiar with the LaRouche group than we might think. I really doubt there's any influence. Their ideas are pretty incompatible with each other. One's pro-China, one's anti-China. One wants the government to spend lots of money on infrastructure, and the other wants there to be a whole bunch of tariffs, and those are two big differences. All right. Marxism says that liberalism is no longer progressive. It does, but you have to understand what liberalism means. All right. And Marx, when we talk about liberalism, the way most people in the United States understand liberalism, they think there are liberals and then there are conservatives, right? There are Democrats and Republicans. Democrats are liberals, conservatives are Republicans. But the term liberalism actually refers to an ideology that comes out of the Enlightenment and out of the overthrow of feudalism. It is an ideology that celebrates individual rights, individualism above all else. And nowadays, we have two forms of liberalism. We have market liberalism, which is economic liberalism, and that's what conservatives, Republicans tend to emphasize. They want free markets. They don't want a welfare state. They don't want taxes, etc. And we have social liberalism, which is the idea that a person has no obligation to their community, breaking down traditional structures, etc. And so you have social liberalism, and that's the Democrats, and you have economic liberalism, which is the conservatives. Marxism is illiberal. It is an illiberal ideology that argues that humanity has a collective fate, and that the fate of all humanity is collective, and it argues for building class unity, a collective interest, organizing the working class to fight for their interests. So by definition, Marxism is an illiberal ideology. It is not liberalism. It is a negation of liberalism. And because of that, basically, yes, Marxism sees liberalism as no longer revolutionary. That is an accurate assessment of what Marxism teaches. Marxism no longer sees liberalism as being a good thing. It views liberalism in a negative light. So with that understanding, yeah, I would say that they are correct. Marxism says liberalism is no longer progressive. But in the age of feudalism, liberalism was progressive. It broke down the feudal structures, the feudal hierarchies, etc. Next question. Is Russia taking NATO seriously enough? I mean, look, I know that Russia very much does not want to get into a confrontation with NATO, and NATO doesn't want to get into a direct confrontation with Russia. That would mean World War III. Now, NATO is aiding Ukraine, but there are not NATO troops in Ukraine, because a direct confrontation between NATO troops and Russian troops, NATO airplanes and Russian airplanes, would mean World War III. That would be two nuclear powers getting into war with each other, and that would not go well. But NATO is aligned with Ukraine, but Russia is winning great victories in Ukraine. So, you're not going to hear that on U.S. media, but there you go. Is BreadTube is the left wing of Capital? Well, no, they're content creators. I mean, the left wing of Capital tends to, that tends to be the higher level capitalists, the Rockefellers, that very much funded Planned Parenthood, that promoted the sexual revolution, that funded modern art, the Rockefellers, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Carlos Slim, George Soros. Those are wealthier capitalists who have a more liberal and managerial approach to politics. Now, BreadTube seems to be aligned with them, and it is trying to cultivate support for the left wing, if you want to call it left wing of capital. And it seems like Trump kind of represented, the lower level capitalists kind of resisting the higher level capitalists. But no, you would be wrong to argue that BreadTube is itself the left wing of capital. These are content creators. These are people that are trying to make a buck. It's a gig. I mean, they're basically actors or broadcasters in the 21st century. So no, they are not the left wing of capital. All right. Do you need patriotism to be a patriotic socialist? Well, this is the whole thing about patriotic socialism, right? What is patriotism? What is patriotism? Patriotism is just loving the country in which you live and wanting what's best for it. And in order to truly be a patriot, you got to be an internationalist, because in order to truly love the country you live in, you have to want it to have a good relationship with other countries. And to truly be an internationalist, you have to be a patriot, because if you truly want the people of the world to get along, you can't have the people of your homeland be miserable, because they're part of the international community as well. So there is no contradiction between patriotism and internationalism. Now, that said, there are many differences, or there is a difference between patriotism and nationalism. Nationalism means you blindly support the interest of one's nation and don't put the interest of anyone else in that, right? Nationalism is loyalty to one's nation. The United States is not a nation. The United States does not have a common language. It does not have a common culture. It does not have the common attributes of a nation. The United States is not a nation. There is a black nation in the U.S., the black people that were brought to this country in chains and slavery, and have their own dialect and their own slang and live in the same neighborhoods and are concentrated in the Black Belt regions. Even still today, they have the highest concentration in the Black Belt regions of the South. The black people of the United States constitute an oppressed nation within U.S. borders. The Chicano people, the Sun Belt, Southern California, Arizona, New Mexico, those folks, the Chicano people, who've lived there since before that was part of the United States, they certainly constitute a nation. They have their own language, their own territory, their own culture, etc. But the USA overall is not a nation. We don't have a common language. We don't have a common heritage. Many of us came here from different parts of the world at different times. We don't have a common culture, common history. We don't even have a common economy at this point. With imperialism, you got big mega corporations in the United States that are tied in all over the world, reaping in super profits from across the planet. So the United States is not a nation. So even if one was a nationalist, you couldn't be a nationalist for the United States because the United States is not a nation. There's that. But then next question. So patriotism simply means you want a better life for the people of the country. And the fact that people get all triggered and angry when I talk about patriotic socialism just reveals they really have no desire to win over ordinary people, because ordinary people don't want life to get worse in the country that they live in. They don't. They want life to get better. And if you go to average people and you're like, I hate the country I live in, you might feel good about yourself, but you're really not going to build any kind of movement that could actually be successful. And that's the problem. If you start approaching average people with the message that you hate the country they live in, you hate the community they live in, you want to make life worse there, you're not a serious political person. So there you go. There you go. All right. How does the Lumpenproletariat fit into your political program? Well, it needs to be eliminated in terms of its existence. Those folks need to be decriminalized. Those folks need to be given jobs and access to education. And we need to uplift the Lumpenproletariat to be part of the proletariat. The Lumpenproletariat needs to be absorbed into the proletariat. Give those folks decent jobs and housing and schools. Get them into conditions where they don't have to live on the margins of society, but rather can be involved in producing wealth for the society of all, right? Under socialism, the value that is created by the proletariat is enjoyed by all. And in a socialist society, you wouldn't really have a Lumpenproletariat. Instead, you would have you would have the proletariat overall producing wealth that's not for the benefit of private owners, but for the benefit of all society. So the Lumpenproletariat would be absorbed into the broader proletarian class, and that proletarian class would be the leadership. So yes, and with our 4-point plan, hiring the unemployed, rebuilding crumbling infrastructure, rebuilding impoverished neighborhoods, using, funding it with public ownership of oil and gas, public ownership of banking, strategically assigning credit. I think we would strategically assign credit to uplift the Lumpenproletariat. When I was in Venezuela, I went to a neighborhood in Caracas that now just has this beautiful auditorium, and it's where the kids have their graduation ceremony. There's plays that are performed there, and this beautiful, beautiful community auditorium in Venezuela is built on a lot, an empty lot that used to be where people went to buy heroin, and it used to be where people would take stolen cars and break them up and take the parts and extract the parts from stolen cars. So, they replaced kind of a hangout for lumpen proletarians. They replaced it with a beautiful state-of-the-art theater where kids now go to quality schools. Every Venezuelan child is able to learn a musical instrument, right? I mean, it's really just beautiful, right? And yeah, I mean, our program would be uplifting the lumpen proletariat and observing them into the value-creating proletariat as the value-creating and wider proletarian class becomes the ruling class. So there you go. Another example that I heard was in Iran. There's a park in Iran, in Tehran, that they call Needle Park because that's where people do heroin. And Iran has a big problem with heroin. So the mayor of Tehran, who is considered, a populist and an ally of working people, the mayor of Tehran moved his home right to that park to make a statement that because he didn't want the crime to be an issue. And so the mayor, could you imagine that? The mayor of New York City moving Gracie Mansion right to a neighborhood that's had a problem with crime to make a statement, right? That was really, really kind of a beautiful statement. So yes, the idea is to uplift the lumpen proletariat, give people opportunity, get people out of that lifestyle, and give them something, give them an opportunity to create value. Because the definition of the lumpen proletariat, the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, Karl Marx, he talks about how the lumpen proletariat aren't creating value. They live on the margins of society, and the idea is to lift them up. So there you go. Thoughts on the Great Leap Forward? Well, it was an episode of mismanagement. And my conversation with this John guy, Coach John, that I did an interview with about communism recently. He asked me about the Great Leap Forward, and I gave him an answer. I said it was an episode of mismanagement. However, it's worth noting that the Great Leap Forward was an awful incident. It's an incident of mismanagement. There were famines all the time before 1949. But you'll notice the famines before 1949 have very short Wikipedia pages. But the Great Leap Forward, because it can be blamed on the Communist Party, has a huge Wikipedia page. And that shows that, again, no one cares about the millions of Chinese people who starved to death in 1928. No one cares about the millions of Chinese people that starved to death in 1900. No one cares about the millions of Chinese people that starved to death as a result of the Opium Wars and the failure of China's ability. Before the Chinese Revolution, people were starving all the time. There was constant famines, constant starvation. And no one cares about that because it doesn't have value against the communists. And who is it who cured China of awful famines? The communists. The communists are the ones that cured China of having horrendous famines, like what happened during the Great Leap Forward. Now, obviously, there was some mismanagement in the Great Leap Forward, and it didn't go as quickly as they wanted. But it's China that it's the Chinese Communist Party that mechanized China's agriculture. It's the Chinese Communist Party that electrified China. It's the Chinese Communist Party that has eradicated extreme poverty in the country. When people say, oh, communism equals famines, no, communism ends famines. It was the Soviet Communist Party that built a modern agricultural system and electrified Russia. It was the Chinese Communist Party that made China what it is today, the second largest economy in the world. China ends famine. Communism ends famine. So yeah, this is the way these things are taught is very frustrating. If anyone has any more super chats, I'm going through these pretty quickly because we're having technical difficulties. This stream has been a little bit of a disaster. I'll just be honest. But hey, these things happen. But I guess if anyone has any more super chats, I will answer them. Sorry about the technical difficulties, folks, and thanks for sticking around. I really do appreciate it. But let me ask, someone asked, the last super chat I have listed here is, what are your thoughts on the Great Reset? Well, look, the pandemic was seen as an opportunity by the ultra-rich to secure their monopoly. And they saw it as an opportunity to speed ahead with their agenda of using the disaster around climate change to drive down living standards, reduce the population, and demolish their competitors and secure their monopoly. The pandemic has been great for Jeff Bezos. It's been great for the Walton family that owns Walmart. It's been great for Bill Gates. It's been great for Mark Zuckerberg, but it hasn't been so good for small business owners. Hasn't been so good for working families who've been out of work, and they've been really, really suffering. They've been really, really suffering. And the Great Reset has just been kind of an opportunity by the ultra monopolists within the ruling class to secure their monopoly. All right, folks. I guess if there are no more super chats, I guess we'll wrap it up here. Yeah, there you go. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. All right, folks. Danger of a new world war still exists. People of all countries must get prepared. Revolution is the main trend in the world today. Have a good night.